What is up, everybody? Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of Let the Record Show for UFC 251. Obviously a huge pay-per-view card coming up this weekend, and I'm going to take a look at the records of some of the big names and some of the big fights on the card. There'll be minimal analysis, almost no analysis, almost no COVID-19 talk or any of that in this. This is purely records. Let the record show. It is what it says. So we're going to take a look down through Wikipedia, down through Tapology, see how this card lines up, see how these fighters line up, and go from there. I do this myself every week. I've done it before. I'm sure a lot of people have watched before. But preparing for the cards, I do this. I look at their records and see how it goes. So come along on the journey with me. And if you've watched the show before, you know the first thing we do is this, the Wikipedia test, to see how many people have the blue names on Wikipedia and how strong this card is. So it's a pretty strong card. Look at the main card there. Every single person on it has a blue name. We see the preliminary card, apart from the main event of it, which everyone knows is a very good fight. The two fights under it, and Roman Bagatov doesn't have the blue name here, and the undercard, not the strongest in the world, but obviously with a few names we know there as well. So let's jump on over here to Tapology. Thanks to my friends over at Tapology for this. And the first thing I'm going to look at here is the one thing I said, there'll be minimal accounts of the coronavirus and everything like that on this, but you have to speak about this on the card. So the first thing I want to say is Pedro Munoz versus Frankie Edgar is obviously taken off the card because Pedro Munoz failed test for coronavirus. Unfortunately, hope he's okay and everyone associated with him. And in fact, Gabriel Burns and everyone else on the card as well who failed. Hopefully everyone will be okay. But this Frankie Edgar card, as a time of recording here, or the Frankie Edgar fight, not sure if it's been rescheduled, not sure what's happening. So I think Frankie Edgar is a guy we all know pretty well anyway, so maybe there's no need to go through him. But Frankie Edgar, if he does fight, if it's down 135 pounds, it'll be his debut at 135 pounds, and hopefully he will be able to get a fight, or hopefully that'll be rescheduled if that's the way it goes. Then obviously the Cameron Usman versus Gilbert Burns was due to be the main event, but obviously that has changed, which we'll get to in a second. And then Martine Tabora, Alexander Romanov as well is another bout cancelled off this card. So thank you very much to Tapology, obviously, for that. So let's go up through the cards while we have it this way, and then we'll in great detail talk about the top three. So let's just have a quick look. We all know Davy Grant from around this area over in the UK. He's 9-4, fighting Martin Daly from the US, who's 9-3. Obviously a very evenly matched fight there in terms of records, fighting 135 pounds. Vanessa Mello, 10-7 against Carlosa, 12-3, fighting at 135 pounds. Another evenly matched bout there. Similar here for these two, fighting at 125 pounds, 19-3 versus 13-3. We have Martine Tabora against Maxime Grisham, two very experienced heavyweights, 18-6 for Tabora, and Grisham 37-2. Roman Bagatov 10-0, obviously an exciting guy coming through. See him lightweight, number 4 in Russia. So when you see that, and when you see 10-0, you know this guy is someone you need to look out for. And fighting Leandro Santos, who's obviously been around a long time, at 155 pounds, that's definitely one to keep an eye on in the lower part of the undercard. Danny Henry, 12-3 from Scotland, fighting Ireland's own Mr. Finland Makwan Amirkhani, obviously fighting out of SBG these days. A big fight. Let's have a quick look at Makwan Amirkhani, considering probably a lot of Irish people listen to this, and a lot of people who are from Dublin and would have an interest in the SBG guys. So what a magnificent picture there Makwan Amirkhani has. Brilliant. So obviously, as I said, fighting out of SBG Ireland, 31 years of age, and the featherweight division, obviously 5'10", pretty big featherweight. You know, Conor McGregor, what, 5'9", fought the featherweight, and he was always big. So Amirkhani even bigger. Obviously he was supposed to fight Mike Grundy, that was cancelled. His last fight was a loss to Shane Burgos, round 3 KO there, and we've kind of seen what Burgos has done for since came into that fight at 12-1 and looked good in his last fight against Josh Emmett recently, although he came out on the losing side of that. Beat Chris Fishgold, who's obviously a standout in the UK. Before that, beat Jason Knight, who's as tough as nails. We all know what Jason Knight is. Lost to Arnold Allen, arguably the form featherweight in the world at the moment. Arnold Allen, outside of maybe Alexander Volkanovski. So losing a split decision to him, like a split decision to Jason Knight, winning it, there's definitely no shame in that, and that maybe shows the level that Amirkhani can reach, because I really think Allen is a very, very good fighter. Beat Mike Wilkinson before that. and his 2 opening fights as well. This one, look how quick this was. 8 seconds around 1. 1 minute 41 seconds around 1 against Massimo Fullen. So that's the type of fighter that Amir Khani is, and he'll have a tough matchup obviously against Danny Henry as well. Then my boy Zeki Iluzio Zaleski against Muslim Salikov at 170 pounds. 2 experienced guys there as well, 2 kind of hard-nosed guys with lots of skills. Should be a good fight. Yuri, I won't even go for the second name, against Vulcan Ozdemir, the main event of the prelim card. Let's look at, we all know, but let's quickly look at Ozdemir's record, I suppose, and just look at kind of who he has fought and the level he has fought at, because that's the kind of the tale of this fight, I suppose. So he fought Rakic and beat him in his last fight. Rakic was the guy coming through who everyone was talking about as one of the, you know, like Johnny Walker and like Thiago Santos and everyone else coming through at a 205 pounds. He was the next guy coming through, and he, Ozdemir beat him. Beat Ilir Latifi before that. Dominic Reyes, obviously another one coming through. He fought him, lost to him, lost to Anthony Smith, but he's fought Cormier, he's fought Manoa, he's fought Serkinov, he's fought OSP. The list goes on. He's fought all the best guys in that division in a very, very short time, and obviously fought Daniel Cormier for the title. So that's the level that Ozdemir has been fighting of. Whereas Yuri, and I'm not going to go to second name, even someone taught me how to pronounce it, I'm not even going to go for it, but he's coming in and he's making his UFC debut here, but he's fought and risen. Look at these names on his card. CB Dollaway knocked him out in the first round. Fabio Maldonado knocked him out in the first round. Mohamed Lawal knocked him out in the third round. Brandon Halsey, we've seen around in Bellator and other places, I believe, as well, knocked him out at 6 minutes of the first round. So if you look at those 4 fights alone, he is fighting at a level there of, okay, Dollaway and Maldonado especially a good bit beyond their prime, or never really towards the top. And I suppose you could say the same about Lawal as well, although he was a very, very good fighter in his prime, but injuries and things like that as well. But, to beat guys like that at any stage of their career is still very good and shows what level of quality you're at. Now, will Ozdemir be a step too much? We'll find out. But he's definitely had some very good people. Carlisle Braxton, we've seen him around. He's fought in the UFC as well, I believe. Jake Hune. Lots of good guys, and lots of fights. Fought Mohamed Lawal before, fought Vadim Nimkov, who's done very well around, fought Satoshi Ishii. So lots of guys, that we know, having fought and risen for. Dario Stosic, we've seen him around as well. So very, very good names on his record for someone who's never fought in the UFC, and it'll be very interesting to see his UFC debut here at the weekend. Then we have Paige Vanzant versus Amanda Hebas. Let's have a quick look at Paige Vanzant, 8-4. So 12 gauge Paige. This is the last fight on her UFC contract, apparently, and it's a very, very tough fight for her. Her last fight was a win over Rachel Ostovich via armbar, all the way back in January 2019. Thank God it says 19-1, because otherwise I'd be looking for the American dates and not having a clue what date it actually was. But January last year. So what is it? 12 plus 6, like 18 months around since her last fight. Lots of injuries, lots of issues. It was a year before her fight before that again. It was the January 2018 against Jessica Rose Clark. Lost to Michelle Watterson. That was back in 2016. So 13 months there of a difference between that. So Paige Vanzant has barely fought in the last 3 to 4 years. So this is a huge fight for her, with her leaving the UFC as well. It's absolutely huge. Let's click on Amanda Hebas, who is 9-1, and to me personally, I know this is let the record show, but she's one of my favorite fighters coming through in terms of her personality, her ability, the kind of the rise she is given, where many people aren't even talking about her, but they will be very soon. She's someone that's going to be, an overnight success, even though she's been doing it for a good while now. Beat Randa Marcos by unanimous decision recently, who I rate very highly. I think Randa is an underrated fighter. She doesn't always have maybe the results to prove it, although coming into that fight 10-7-1, that's lots of fights to have, not the worst record in the world, and it could be even better. I think a lot of close fights there. Beat Mackenzie Dern, who everybody knows what kind of talent she is. Beat Emily Whitmire, who's another fight. Okay, she's only 6-2, but Hebas was only 6-1 for that fight, and that was her UFC debut. So those are 3 pretty tough fights. Was supposed to fight Paige Vanzant before as well, but those are 3 pretty tough fights to make your UFC debut, and to follow it up with those other 2 after it. So pretty good wins there. Now let's go down, and she obviously lost to Polyana Viana, who has fought in the UFC as well, and her only loss that was outside the UFC. So let's look at how she wins her fights. And let's go down here. So her wins 3 by KO, TKO, 3 by submission, and 3 by decision. So obviously well spread out there. And her 1 loss was by KO, TKO. So it'd be interesting to see, because we look at Paige Vanzant in a second, and it's her last fight of her career, barely fought in a while. And if you're looking at betting, we'll get to the betting show as well on Friday. Would you be betting KO? Would you be betting decision? Would you be betting submission? I suppose that's one we'll all have to decide for ourselves. But that's a very interesting fight, obviously, to open up the card, and we've looked at Paige as well, fighting at 125 pounds now as well. So Paige, I know she's fought down the weight, so this one's 125 pounds. A rematch of a title fight in the next fight of the card as 115 pounds. Jessica Andrade, the former champion who was beaten by Zhang Weili, fights Roseanne Immunise, who was beaten by Jessica Andrade for the title. Their rematch there. So let's look at Jessica Andrade. She's an eclectic mix of people on her card in all different sorts of weight classes. So actually, let's just look at her age to see where she is now. 28 years of age, still very young for someone who's been around a lot and been at many different weight classes. Still very, very young. Her MMA record 20-7, lots of fights there as well. So her last fight, that quick 42-second loss to Zhang Weili, how will she recover from that? You know, we see some people, they get knocked out quickly and they come back brilliantly. Jose Aldo, the perfect example, who we'll see later on, came back after losing in 13 seconds to Conor McGregor and destroyed Frankie Edgar over 25 or was it 15 minutes or 25 minutes, I think, yeah. So and we'll see that later on, I can confirm it as well. But or will she be someone, you know, like say a Francis Ngannou, who didn't get knocked out but lost to Stipe Miocic and came back and had a really bad fight against Derek Lewis, and it took him time to come back. It'd be interesting to see what she's like. Now, she's experienced loss before, obviously, but in a stage like this and quick like that, I don't think she has, and we'll see in a second, maybe she has. Before that, obviously, a tremendous run, a brilliant run. Apart from maybe Ioana and Jacek, probably the best run we've seen at the weight class at the top level, beating Immunise, beating Kovalkiewicz, beating Torres, beating Gadelha. And there's the aforementioned Jacek before that. She lost to her for the title, beat Angela Hill, who's improved an awful lot since. Maybe it didn't look as good a win at that time, but probably looks better now. Beat Joanne Calderwood, the number 1 contender at the weight class above. Beat Jessica Pennington, who's fought for the title as well. And I believe, what weight class is that at? That's at 115 pounds as well, yeah. So she's fought at that. Then we have grappling matches. Before that, then, what weight class is this? So yeah, this is 135 pounds. So she changed after this, went down to 115. Raquel Pennington, we know, fought for a title. She lost to her by rear naked choke. SevereMMA, she beat her. And beat Raquel Pennington. Before that, beat Rosie Sexton, the first English woman in the UFC, if I'm not incorrect there. Shout out to Rosie. Councillor Rosie, now I believe she is as well. Fought Liz Carmouche. There's really a who's who of people she has fought here, and she's been around for a long, long time as well, making her debut all the way back in 2011. So 9 years in the sport. It's usually when you're around your prime, around your best, especially when you're 28 years old, and maybe haven't taken loads of damage, and coming down to 115 pounds, I think, is probably beneficial to her as well, because she's not the biggest woman in the world. But let's see how she wins her fight. Obviously 20-7, as we mentioned there. Her wins: 7 KO, 7 submissions, 6 via decision, which for someone who's fighting up the weights, 20 pounds heavier than she's fighting at the moment for a large majority of her career, or a large portion of her career anyway, that's a very good finish rate. You know what? Over 66%, around a 70% finish rate. That's quick maths there now. I don't want to go big Shaq or anything, but it's a good percentage rate. So what? 14 out of 20 wins. So that would be 70% exactly. I got it right. Correct. Go Ben Shawnee. That old maths degree is paying off. And her losses then: 3 KO, 2 submission, and 2 decision. So let's have a look at the former champion, another former champion in Roseanne Immunise. 8-4. It's crazy to think Roseanne Immunise is someone who's so highly thought of and been around for so long and still only has a record of 8-4. It's absolutely crazy. It's a bit of a Randy Couture record where we have to kind of look through the record, and this is what this show is really about, where you have to kind of look through the record rather than just look at the numbers themselves. So her last fight was 14 months ago, and it was this match against Jessica Andrade. So this is an immediate rematch for Roseanne Immunise. Not for Jessica Andrade, but it is for Roseanne Immunise. Not for the title leader, obviously, because Jessica Andrade has lost it. But huge fight for her. And we'll see how she gets on. But that fight, obviously, she was winning early and lost by a slam in the second round. Before that, she fought Ioana Jacek twice. You know, probably still the greatest fighter at that weight class, even though Rose did beat her twice, but she didn't go on to claim the title or to regain the title again in another match. So maybe, that's still up for debate, obviously, but Jędrzejczyk has done it for a long, long time. And for Roseanne Immunise to beat her twice, there's no substitute for that. So really, really good wins there. Beat Michelle Waterson as well. And before that, very early in her career. Like, look at this, 5-2 to be fighting Karolina Kowalkiewicz, 4-2 to be fighting Tecia Torres, 3-2 to be fighting Paige Vanzant, 2-2 to be fighting Angela Hill, 2-1 to be fighting Carla Esparza for the title. So this was the inaugural UFC 115-pound title fight. She was only 2-1. Only 2-1 in her career. That is absolutely crazy. And before that, look at the people she fought in tough. Randa Marcos, who I spoke about earlier, who I rate a lot. Joanne Calderwood, #1 contender now. Alex Chambers, Tecia Torres again. And like in Invicta, her opening 2 fights. Emily Kagan, who's around, I believe she's in the UFC at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. And Katina Lowe as well, who was a similar sort of record to herself. So Roseanne Immunise has fought no one but either evenly matched fighters or fighters who are more experienced than her. So this record at 8-4, really, like if you were to say someone has an 8-4 record, you might think that's the best thing in the world. But for Roseanne Immunise, it's a fantastic record, a fantastic learning record with lots of good wins on it as well. And you see the other amateur fights of hers there. So let's see how she wins her fights. 1 by KO, 8 by submission, which is a lot. I didn't think it'd be that much when I was thinking of this, and 2 by decision. So Rose, I think as well, not to get too technical or anything about it, but I think she's adjusted her game a little bit. She's becoming more of a striker, and we see that 1 KO was of Joanna Jędrzejczyk, if I'm not mistaken. So in the biggest spot for her career. So she's becoming more and more striking, putting the submissions and striking together. If she can do that, as I've mentioned before on the SevereMMA podcast, that's a big part of her game. So if she can do that, it'll be a different level. And her losses, 1 by KO, 1 by submission, and 2 by decision. Right, let's hop back here and look at the 3 title fights. So in the third from the top, we have Petr Yan from Russia at 14-1, fighting Jose Aldo Jr., the former 2-time featherweight champion of the world, 28-6-0 for the 135-pound title. In the fight above that, for the featherweight title at 145 pounds over 5 5-minute rounds, we've Alexander Volkanovski at 21-1, rematching Max Holloway at 21-5. And in the main event, we have Kamaru Usman, 16-1, fighting on short notice the legend, game-bred Jorge Masvidal, 35-13 for the 170-pound title over 5 5-minute rounds. I have to look at Masvidal first. This is the dream, isn't it, really, for this show? 35-13, so many fights, so much experience, so many years, and finally getting a title shot. Shades of Michael Bisping, getting it after so many years of being around the scene, and really, really deserving it, especially for what's happened recently. So we'll get to that. 35 years of age, Masvidal. If this is the time to do it, it has to be now. It has to be this time. If he doesn't do it this time, he'll probably never do it. But let's look at this, what he's done in recent times, and then we'll look back on what he's done before, and we'll skim through it quickly, because I think this is very important, and it's these 3 fights. We'll ignore my boy Wonderboy for a second. Darren Till, second round punches finish. Ben Askren, 5 seconds, fastest knockout in UFC history. Nate Diaz, a drubbing over 3 rounds, and a doctor stoppage. Although we can talk about that, we won't get into it. But he beat the hell out of Nate Diaz for 3 rounds. You can have your opinions on where it would go, but you can't question that. So those 3 big wins. Till, who fought for the title around that time. Ben Askren, who many people considered the best welterweight in the world at 19-0 in that time, and he got knocked out by Masvidal in 5 seconds. And Nate Diaz, coming off of those 2 epic fights with Conor McGregor, beat the 2-weight champion McGregor in 2 rounds. So when you beat someone like that, they're very, very good, obviously. So his last fight back in November for the BMF title against Nate Diaz over 5 5-minute rounds. So he's not out, for in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, not out of the cage for the longest time in the world. But it's before that, I think, that shows, if you're to look at that by itself, and you're to see this contender coming up, rising to be the next challenger, this is perfect. Like, you beat Till, beat Askren, destroy Askren anyway, and beat Till and beat him comprehensively, and beat Nate Diaz like that as well. You definitely deserve your title shot after that. But it's the rise before that changed it. Lost to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in a drubbing, really, over 3 rounds. Lost the split decision to Damian Maia before that. in a competitive fight. Obviously a split decision, anyone goes to a split decision with Maya, especially back in that time, is very, very good. But we'll run down through it quickly. Beat Cerrone, beat Ellenberger, beat Pearson, lost to Larkin, lost to Henderson, beat Freya, lost to Iaquinta, beat Kraus, beat Cruikshank, beat Healy, lost to Rustam Kabalov, beat Chiesa. I actually had Michael Chiesa backed in that fight. Thanks, Jorge. Lost to Tim Means. Wilcox beaten by Gilbert Melendez. KJ Noon's on his list as well. Billy Evangelista lost to Paul Daly. And you see here Shark Fights, Strike Force, Florida Regional, fight Luis Palomino, the title and challenger over in World Series of Fighting. Fought in Bellator, fought Toby Almada, fought in Bellator 1. Fought over in Sengoku against Ryan Schultz, fought Rodrigo Dam, fought Ryan Healy in Strike Force again. Fought at the Playboy Mansion, fought in Tribute for the Troops Above, fought in Bodog, as we see here. He knows how to fight in a real fight island. That Keith Wazinski fight is over on YouTube as well. Fought Joe Lozon, fought Rafael Assunção, the 135-pounder Rafael Assunção in one of his first fights. Just an eclectic mix of people who he's fought over the years. Fought in backyards with Kimbo Slice, and that's where Masvidal has come from. He came from all of these fights and everything beyond it as well to fight for the title. So it's very, very interesting to see his career and see his record. And let's look at how he's won those fights. So 35-13, an insane record. Obviously he's wins 16 by KO, TKO, 2 by submission, and 17 by decision. And there was a point, as we saw the top 3 fights, Nate Diaz, Dr. Stoppage, fastest knockout of all time against Ben Askren, and Darren Till beat him up badly as well, or knocked him out anyway in the second round. Those KOs. So it's gone from this 17 decisions, which a lot of them are coming against the likes of Wonderboy, we'll see losses as well, but win to decision with Wonderboy, win to decision with Damian Maya, and loads of other people. Lots of split decisions in there as well, and lots of wins, obviously 17 wins by decision, but it's kind of turned, and 3 in a row to win by KO is the big difference Masvidal has made in his career. So I think that's an important number. If he can manage to bring that number up and get it even with this number, I think that's what he'll be looking to do. Maybe stay away from the middle one there. And the losses then, look at this. I was talking about that, like 10 decision losses. So 27 of his career fights have gone to a decision. Isn't it mad we talk about a fighter being so exciting when that happens? That many fights have gone to a decision with him. So many decisions, on the record of Masvidal, and if it goes to decision with him, it's always going to be a close fight. But he seems to have changed around from that, and we'll see how it goes. And we'll have a look at his opponent now next, Kamaru Usman. Before we get to the other fights, 16-1 in his career. A very, very good record. Champion of the world. 33 years of age, which, it seems, he doesn't seem that old, does he? He doesn't seem like he's been around for that long a time, but did a lot of wrestling. Obviously, look, University of Nebraska, he's fought out of there. So, beat Colby Covington in his last fight at UFC 245, beat Tyron Woodley before that, the former champion of the world, beat Rafael Dos Anjos, who was a former champion as well, down 155 pounds, beat Damian Maya, who fought for titles at 2 weight classes, if I'm not mistaken. He did indeed, Sean, you're correct. Emil Weber-Meck, who we know of that famous Grabaka Hitman video over on Twitter, knocking out, what's his name? The madman from Brazil, who crushes everyone's knees. Oh, everyone's running at the TV now, aren't you? Oh, I have to look at it. I can't leave it at that. I can't. What's his name? Who's Samar Pal Harris? I don't need to look at it. I got it. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so those are the level of guys he was beating. Sergio Moraes for that as well, who we know, very experienced guy, been around for a long time. Warley Alves, Alexander Yakovlev, God, I ruined that one. Leon Edwards, who's around the top at the moment. And then he came in through the tough house, beating Haider Hassan, Steve Carroll, Mike Graves. And we'll see the early loss in his career was to Jose Caceres, who fought a lot of people around that level in Florida, fought Colby Covington too. So a quick look again. I feel like I rushed through it. Colby Covington, a really good win, a finish there, and a hard fought fight. That was just at the end of last year as well. So as I mentioned with Masvidal, not the longest time out of the cage in the middle of a pandemic. Tyron Woodley was just before that, 9 months before that. So, relatively busy 2019 after a busy 2018 as well. So a very good record there for the champion Kamaru Usman. His wins have come 7 by KO TKO, 1 by submission, and 10 by decision. So if you're back into submission in this one, lads, it's probably not the best one in the world. His only loss has been by submission. But yeah, this is probably going to be a stand-up fight, I would say, if Masvidal can get his way. And if not, it'll probably be a lot of ground and pound from Usman on the floor. So interesting to see how it goes. Right. Let's look at the rematch, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. And we look at the champion first, Volkanovski, 31 years of age, which is also older than you would have thought. His last fight against Max Holloway beat him over 5-minute rounds. Does it say the... It doesn't. I thought it'd say the actual score, but he beat him pretty comprehensively. A unanimous decision there. Before that, the legend Jose Aldo, we'll talk about in a second. He beat him. Beat Chad Mendes, the former multiple, 3-time challenger for the title. Yeah, he fought Aldo twice and Conor McGregor as well. There might be one I'm missing in there, is there? No, I think that's it. But he fought him for the title. Fought the damaged Team Sheehan's Darren Elkins as well. Fought Jeremy Kindi, who's been around for a long time. So he had 11-0 he beat him at. Shane Young beat him at 11-3. So fighting all good guys there. Mizuto Hirota, an experienced guy as well before that. And then you see the rest of his record here, coming over obviously from a lot of fights in Australia against a lot of guys there. And his only loss of his career to, if I'm not mistaken, to Corey Nelson. Similar, to Usman losing on the local scene, one of your early fights. And for maybe young'uns listening to this who are coming up, to take heed of that, you might lose one early, but you'll come through and look at the record you have then, 20-1 after beating the champion and now going into a rematch after beating Aldo and Mendes as well. So let's look at how he has won his fights and the summary here. So 10 by KO TKO, 3 by submission and 1 by decision, and his losses, the only one obviously by KO. So the majority there either finishing by KO TKO or decision. So not many submissions floating around in these fights. Let's look at his opponent. Max Blessed Holloway, who lost his title to Alexander Volkanovski here. Let me just make sure of this, right? I feel like I just came up with a stat here. So his losses: Volkanovski, champion of the world; Poirier, lightweight interim champion of the world; Conor McGregor, obviously two-way champion of the world; Dennis Bermudez, oh no, I was wrong, champion, no champion, and Poirier champion as well. So no, I was going to come up with a stat there, a useless fact in the middle of it, but I didn't, unfortunately. But you see before that, Volkanovski, obviously, a relatively close fight, although watching it back, I think Volkanovski won it clearer than maybe I thought at the time, and maybe a lot of people thought at the time. But his first loss at featherweight for a long time, his first title loss at featherweight. Before that, he beat the much acclaimed Frankie Edgar, the future Hall of Famer, possibly Frankie Edgar, and his 97th UFC featherweight title fight. This is records, this is all about facts. And beat him unanimous, an easy win there. Went up in weight to fight Dustin Poirier before that, and for me a terrible style matchup, but lost there at 155 pounds. Before that, it was down against Brian Ortega in a doctor stoppage at the end of the fourth round. It was that sort of fight. It was a real doctor stoppage. He got beaten down in that fight to Brian Ortega. And before that, there was a year out of the cage. Cancelled bout against Ortega, cancelled bout against Habib, cancelled bout against Frankie Edgar. There was that problem. Remember, Bisping saw him on the TV and he looked like he was shaking a little bit or something. People were talking about head injuries and stuff, but that didn't come to be because the fight was cancelled, and he looked great after it, obviously beating Ortega and everything like that. So he's looked great since. So any problems that were there, thankfully the fights didn't go through and he was able to recover, and he's back to his best now and hasn't taken any knockout or anything since that. His two losses have been by unanimous decision. Before that, 2 fights against the legend Jose Aldo, former champion of the world Anthony Pettis as well. Beat Ricardo Lamas, who's a very good fighter and been around. You could say the exact same about Jeremy Stevens, Charles Oliveira, Cub Swanson, a little bit less obviously Cole Miller, Kira Kurasani, Clay Collard, Andre Feely and will show up. Guys who have been around and are good fighters as well. And before that, that loss to Conor McGregor and Dennis Bermudez. The loss to Conor McGregor, how many wins? I think it was 11 wins or something after that. Lots of wins and title wins and beating Aldo. So that loss to McGregor, that did Holloway very, very well, and he was young in his career as well back in 2013, 7 years ago since that fight. Good God Almighty, it doesn't seem like that, does it? But look, fought the legend Leonard Garcia before that, Justin Lawrence, who's been around a long time now as well, and Dustin Poirier early in his career as well. So we know Max Holloway been around a very, very, very long time. We'll see how his wins and losses have come about. So 10 by KO, TKO, 2 by submission, and 9 by decision. Not a lot of submissions, lads. Not a lot of submissions hanging around this card at the weekend. 1 loss by submission, never been knocked out, and 4 by decision. So let's look at the last bantamweight title fight here on the card, and by no means the least, we have the legend Petr Yan. Well, the legend Jose Aldo against the up-and-comer Petr Yan, 135 pounds. So let's look at Aldo first, because he's the one we've mentioned 5 or 6 times throughout this. Why does he have... Oh no, he's okay. I thought there was there was something gone wrong there, but all is good. Lost his last fight and his bantamweight debut to Marlon Moraes. A lot of people thought it was controversial. If you'd read the judging criteria, you probably don't, because it was a close fight, but relatively straightforward. I think that's the correct decision, and for him to be fighting for a title is pretty odd. Probably shouldn't be happening, but this is Let the Record show, so we leave that for another show. Lost to Volkanovski before that, as we mentioned earlier on, and that was, you know, his first kind of comprehensive loss in terms of that was, I believe it was 3 5-minute rounds. Yeah, so a 15-minute loss like that, you know, outside of a title fight in a long time. Obviously we'll get to in a second, he lost to Holloway and lost to McGregor, lost to Holloway twice, but this was like the first, and 2 have come now in a row where he lost non-title fights, and, you know, pretty unanimously in the decision to Volkanovski, and in a close one against Moraes. But back into the title picture here on Saturday night anyway. Before that, beat Moicano, beat Jeremy Stephens, 2 very good wins against mid-level fighters at the 145 pounds to get back on track after losing to Holloway twice. And we see, to me, this is the mark of Jose Aldo right here. You can talk about all the title wins you want, but to me, this is the mark of what makes Jose Aldo a legend. Look at this. Conor McGregor lost in 13 seconds. Oh, I'm after making it bigger there. Oh, it looks better, thank God. Lost to Conor McGregor in 13 seconds. But look at this. Frankie Edgar, unanimous decision at UFC 200, came back and destroyed Frank Edgar. Just decided, I think it was Ryan O'Connor put up the video at this time, got knocked out in 30 seconds and then decided in his next fight not to get hit, and that's exactly what happened. He barely got hit against Frank Edgar and beat him down over 5 rounds. A fantastic display, and that tells you all you need to know about Jose Aldo. When you think he's down, he just rises back up, and very, very mentally strong. You know, a lot of people questioned his mentality against Conor McGregor, maybe not giving McGregor enough credit for being the great fighter he is and the great puncher as well that he is, and power puncher, and he did a great job to beat Jose Aldo, but that doesn't mean Jose Aldo is a bad fighter, and he showed that against Frank Edgar. And before that, you know, beat Chad Mendez, beat Ricardo Lamas, beat Chan Sung Jung, beat Edgar again. Remember that date, February 2013. Beat Chad Mendez again before that, beat Kenny Florian, Mark Hominick in his UFC debut, and WEC absolutely ran through everyone there. Manny Gamburian, Uriah Faber, Mike Brown, hope he's well after failing a test for coronavirus as well. Cub Swanson, Chris Mickle, Rolando Perez, Jonathan Brookins, the legend. And look at all of these guys. His first kind of early loss in his career all the way back in 2005, beat Phil Harris as well. So, you know, lots of fights there. Let's look at how he's won his fights. 16 by KO, TKO, 10 by decision. Now, we kind of remember Jose Aldo in the latter part of his career going to a lot of decisions. So maybe the early ones are a bit deceiving there with that many TKOs, KOs, but maybe we'll have another one this weekend if he can find Petr Yan. But his losses then 3 KO, TKO, obviously Conor McGregor and Max Holloway, putting a couple of them on there. 1 by submission and 2 by decision. His last 2, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. So those are the only 2 he's lost by decision, his last 2 fights, which is very interesting. So we look at Petr Yan. What was the date I said? 2013. So let's look at Petr Yan here, 14-1, fighting for the 135 pound title. And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom here. So what was the date? The Jose Aldo Frankie Edgar fight. And look at this. This was his debut. And Wikipedia actually said a different one, so I don't know which one is correct. We might hop over to, but Wikipedia said 2013, late 2013. But whichever it was anyway, he had made his professional debut by the time Jose Aldo and Frank Edgar fought one. So Yan has been around for a bit, 6 years now, but or maybe 7 years, depending on what source you take. But Jose Aldo's been around a very, very long time, and it's very interesting to see how that works out. And obviously he had a few amateur fights before that as well. But we see the early career of Petr Yan, fighting a lot over in ACB, obviously, which is ACB Berkut, which is they had lots of big fights on that promotion going back in the day. Lost to Magomedov, who was 11-0 at the time. He was 5-0. Fought Ed Arthur, who knows very respected around this area. Beat Magomedov, again, easy for me to say, and got that one back. Then came into the UFC after his stint in ACB, beat Teruto Ishihara, beat Son, beat Andrade, beat Dodson, and this was the change, So this was the turn up from a fighter who's 10-1, 11-1 to get to the title, So I beat John Dodson in unanimous decision. Never easy to do. Beat Jimmy Rivera in unanimous decision. You know how much myself and Graham have respect for Jimmy Rivera and talk a bit about him on the podcast and how hard he is to beat. Beat him in a unanimous decision as well, and beat Uriah Faber as I did in the rewatch this week, and it vaulted him into this title contention. Obviously, this Marlon Moraes bout they were talking about, and now he's in to fight Jose Aldo. That's a big jump. If we look at the record and we let the record show here, jumping from Faber, the ghost of Uriah Faber maybe, to Jose Aldo, who's not as good as Jose Aldo once was, but he's still a damn good fighter. Make no mistake about that. Win 3 rounds of Marlon Moraes and fought a very close fight, a very good fight. Forget about the decision for a second. And, has fought all the best in the world up a weight class. Tough fight. And I know Rivera is good. I know Dodson is good. I know Faber is good. But, moving on to this sort of class, it's a big jump. And we'll see if Jan is able for it. Is he able for it? I think he probably is. But it'll be interesting to see. Right. So that's it. Let's have a quick look again. The 3 title fights. Usman versus Masvidal, 170 pounds, all on the line. Can Usman defend his title again, or can Masvidal, the guy who's been around for so long, can he do it? Can he pull it off? Alexander Volkanovski looking to defend his title against Max Holloway. Holloway had to do it against Aldo. He had to give him the rematch after he beat him, and he managed to pull it off. He managed to beat Aldo. Can Volkanovski do the same thing? Petr Yan for the vacant 135 pound title, fighting the legend Jose Aldo, coming down a weight for the second time to fight. Jessica Andrade against Roseanne Immunise, the rematch of the title fight. Who will win it this time? Will it be 1-1 to end this? Will we see a third fight if Roseanne Immunise can pull it off, or will Jessica Andrade vault herself back into contention in that 115 pounds? Can Paige Vanzant go out of the UFC with a win 125 pounds against the up and coming Amanda Hebas, who looks destined for a title shot there in the next year if she can keep winning? Volkan Ozdemir versus Jiri. My boy Zeki against Muslim Salikov, Ireland's own Makwan Armikani, Danny Henry, Santos Bogatov, Tabora, Grisham, lads whose names I can't pronounce, Vanessa Mello, Carla Rosa, Martin Daly, Davy Grant, and all that this weekend on Fight Island as the UFC visits Abu Dhabi again for UFC 251. Hope you all enjoyed this, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe to SevereMMA, and maybe even subscribe to the podcast as well, and sign up on patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. I appreciate everyone watching. Enjoy the fights this weekend. We'll see you next time. Good luck.